It's your boy Young Love, I give him that time. Pancho leg stand, Panchi America, Panji Dwell, Pancho leg stand, Panchi America, Panji Dwell, Ban walk on your leg, Kankara water no watching, Oga level leg, gear, pow, leg, Panda with Yay, Panchi America, Panya Dwell, Chingatonga Pandon, could you ever buy a check out? Papu Panda Jiro, what they be Dwell. Stand Panchi America, Panji Dwell, Pancha leg stand Panchi America, Panji Dwell, Ban walk on your leg, Kankara water no watching, Oga level leg, gear, pow, leg, Panda with Yay, Panchi America, Panya Dwell, Chingatonga Pandon, could you ever buy a check out? Paku Panda Jiro, what they be Dwell.
Thank you so much, our viewers, wherever you are tuning in. Welcome to Lagos State Media Beyond Boundaries. And in the studio with us is one of our usual guests, one of the prominent senior youth of our country, South Sudan, someone who is a researcher, someone who is on the path of academics. And on the recent past, he decided to change the trajectory and seek where he can serve his country adequately. Here with you is Awuolich of PCCA, People's Coalition for Civil Action. And Awuolich will talk to many South Sudanese and other Africans who might join us later on in the issue of Roundtable Initiative. Roundtable Initiative has been on public domain, and many people are discussing it on social media, especially Facebook and on Clubhouse. And many South Sudanese are wondering whether Roundtable Initiative will be different from other agreements government signed with other opposition and mostly the rebels. Roundtables, many are questioning it. Will it be different from national dialogue, which was initiated by the President Salva Kiir in the year 2017? And up to now, people are yet waiting for the fruits of national dialogue. Through those questions, Abraham will clarify most of them today in this show. And to our viewers, thank you for tuning in. And I'm requesting you to share this live stream on your Facebook wall, at least for your colleagues also to get to hear Abraham Awuolich perspective. Abraham, welcome to Lagos State Media. And we are happy to host you today. And our conversation will focus much on your initiative, that's Roundtable. And we have knowledge, or we are aware that many opposition groups, especially those who are in diaspora, which the government returned to call them as all-out group, join hands together and supported this initiative. And for your initiative to grow, you also need to let public know, especially South Sudanese, and some of your colleagues are doing the same thing in different platforms, social media, trying to let the public know the meaning of roundtables and what difference will Roundtable bring to the lives of South Sudanese. With this view, allowed me to welcome Mr. Abraham Awuolich, to give us his opening remark. Thereafter, we move into our conversation. Abraham, the chance is yours.
Thank you, Brother Majuk, and the leadership of Lake State Media and the technical uh, uh, staff of Lake State Media for organizing this show this morning and for inviting me to share my views on important matters related to our country, South Sudan. Um, on the particular question with regards to the roundtable, before I get to that, it is important for us to give our people the context of the roundtable. If our people can recall that in July 2021, the PCCA made a declaration and also subsequently issued a call for popular mobilization and protest against the government in August 2021. And the call was based on the fact that the government was not implementing the revitalized agreement on the resolution of conflict in South Sudan, and the government was not implementing the sovereign resolutions of the people of South Sudan, and that the country was not moving anywhere. And the country had just celebrated 10th anniversary. So 10 years have gone, and South Sudan has nothing to show for in terms of the 10 years of independence. And so we had called for the people of South Sudan to mobilize and organize themselves to challenge the government so that a new political dispensation can be realized. A new political dispensation that was clearly articulated by the people of South Sudan through the National Dialogue, a program that was initiated by President Kiir himself. And there are so many resolutions of the National Dialogue on matters related with governance, on matters related with security, with the economy and social cohesion. These four areas were found to be the key areas that will help South Sudan to turn around. And so a lot of proposals were made with regards to how people want to govern themselves. For example, the people of South Sudan agreed that while 10 state is okay, they think that more people they need more self-governance. People need to be able to control their own decision in their states. They want more powers given to the states, and they want the central government to have their hands off the states' affairs. Right now, we know that it is President Kiir actually who appoints everyone, including the county commissioner. That is not what our constitution say. And so people are saying, no, we don't want the president to appoint anyone in the state. We want to elect our leaders, and we want to make our political, economic, and administrative decisions independent of the national government. This is something that was desired. People have also agreed to share resources. They said, we don't want each state to go and eat alone. We are a community that shares. So we want to share resources together. And so what it means is that if you produce oil as a state, you give 80% to the national government, and it will be shared with the rest of the states, and you keep 20%. 20% you will also share it with the communities and the payams and the counties. So there is a very clear formula about how the people of South Sudan want to be governed. There are also, they have also agreed on the two-term limits, that the president can only run for 2 terms. This is not in our constitution. You may be surprised. But the constitution of South Sudan that we have right now does not have a term limit, which is a big anomaly. But that was intended to prolong the stay in power of some individuals. But the people of South Sudan have ended that. They said, we want an election and we want 2-term limits. So there are other important proposals that were made. For example, one of the things that was said, that was agreed, was that Right now in South Sudan, if you are born in Lake State and you live in Wow for 20 years, you are still considered somebody from Lake State. And therefore you cannot run for election in Wow, and you cannot do it. You cannot participate politically. But they have ended that. They said no. Your residency is where you should participate. Where you live, where you work, where you pay taxes. That's where you should participate politically. So if you live in Malakal and you are originally from Western Equatoria, you must run for a mayor there or a governor. There is no problem, because it is residency rather than your ancestry that determines your political participation. But the president, there were other comments that were made, including people asking President Kiir and Riek Machar to step down. So President Kiir and the government took only that provision and said this is dangerous and we cannot, therefore we forget about the national dialogue resolutions. So that is one thing that the PCCA was unhappy about, and that is partly the reason we have called for the people to oppose the government and to call for the president and his deputies to resign. Now, moving forward, the government suppressed popular uprising. They deployed the army. They prevented people from protesting, and since then, people have been protesting anyway in a small scale, and they are still suppressed. And if you remember, in August this year, there was a small protest in Juba involving some students and young people, and some people were arrested. One of them was shot, and the deputy mayor, who happened to be related to the president, threatened protesters, saying that if they protest, they will use live bullets because they don't have rubber bullets. So, and of course, the peace agreement is coming to an end. And you remember the government set on the 1st of September and voted to extend the transitional period. And the PCCA and other opposition groups have said they will not recognize that extension. And so the roundtable conference is a response to the extension of the transitional period. And so we are saying, and this is contained in our letter which we issued, which was addressed to IGAD on the 15th of March, in which we said the extension will be demanded by the government, but that extension is not justified. So the only way to move forward, instead of saying we are not going to have the extension and there is not going to be an election, what do you have in place? So we are saying, instead of extension, let's have a roundtable conference, so that the roundtable conference will address this stalemate which has been created by people who have extended the peace agreement and people who are opposed to it, and so that we can have a dialogue and to resolve how to move the country forward. In the absence of an election and in the absence of the extension of the peace agreement, there must be something in place. And so that is what we are advocating for. There must be a roundtable conference in which those who have signed the agreement, and the agreement that has now come to an end will be coming to an end by the end of December, and they want to extend it, but we don't accept that extension. There has to be some sort of an agreement how to move the country forward from there. And what we are proposing is the roundtable conference. So what do we want to achieve in the roundtable conference? Well, there are many things, but at least three key important outcomes are expected. One, we think that there will be an agreement on a new transitional government that will be mandated to organize an election, because the end goal is to have a democratic transition in South Sudan. And instead of having an extension of a failed government, it is better to have a new arrangement that will give a new transitional government a limited mandate of organizing an election. And of course, our call is that we, in that transitional government with the mandate of organizing an election, the political parties will be excluded in that arrangement. And the idea is that the current political leadership in Juba, first of all, in and of itself, they don't trust each other enough to organize an election that they can all accept, whether they win or lose. And now, in addition to others who don't trust them all entirely, it is better you have a government made up of people of consensus. We are not saying it has to be a government of technocrat, but it can be made of, it is a government of people that are agreed upon by all the parties to lead this particular transition. But those who currently hold power and those who currently hold political parties will not participate in that government. And the idea is that these people who will be in that transitional government will not run in that election. And therefore, they will be seen as fair arbiters of power. They will fairly adjudicate or oversee the process of transferring power, to a new person. Now, the broader question is, do we want President Kiir and Dr. Riek Machar to run? Preferably, we don't. We don't want them to run even in that election. But if their parties insist that they don't have other candidates other than those, fine, they could run. But they cannot hold power at the same time and organize election. That is the point of contention. So that is our proposition one. Proposition two, those who have arms, those are armed groups who will be part of the roundtable conference. There has to be sort of a military arrangement, and we are also proposing, we have proposed this in our letter to IGAD, that there will be a new reorganization of the army that will recognize that all armed groups will form the new Sudan army, and that nobody will be excluded. But then there has to be a set of criteria on how you become a member of South Sudan army, and all the groups will be will be organized, and they can go through the same set of requirements. And of course, we are asking that there has to be a regional and international panel of experts that will help in setting up that military, of course, with the membership of all the armed groups. So that is one set. It is not the same kind of an agreement that we have now, where you say we will have 50% of the of the current army and another 50%. No, we will not have. We will say if you are an armed group and you have soldiers, they are all going to be part of South Sudan army. But for you, and we have to agree on what makes you a member of South Sudan army. You must meet certain qualifications. And once we know how much army we have and the army that we want to have, then we will have a plan to reduce the people if they are less, or to increase the army if they are more. And so that you neutralize the desire for people to rebel. You get rid of that. So that is one thing that we want to achieve in the roundtable. And lastly, the roundtable will come out with a constitutional text. We don't want to have a peace agreement. We want to have a constitutional agreement. And that means we are not going to put the constitution at the end of the agreement. We are going to put the constitution at the beginning of the agreement. So what that means is that the constitutional issues that are concerning to the people of South Sudan, much of which have been resolved in the national dialogue, will now be put in the constitutional text, and the constitution itself will be the agreement. And so that is basically those are the three sets of objectives that we want to achieve in the roundtable. And so our hope is that, consistent with a non-violent approach, is that instead of fighting, let us sit down and talk. And those who want to maintain power, they if they can convince us that they have a legitimate reason for retaining power, we will listen. And those of us who think that they have run the course of their service to the people of South Sudan, now it's time for them to go home, we will also present our case to them to try to persuade them to step aside peacefully and honorably and allow the country to have a new political dispensation. So this is the basis of the Roundtable Conference. So the Roundtable Conference is not an arbitrary idea. It is a natural progression of where South Sudan is. South Sudan has a peace agreement that is essentially dead, but it is being kept because it has given legitimacy to some people to stay in power, and so they want to cling to it. But the spirit, and if you remember, whenever any peace agreement is signed, there are two parts of the agreement. There is the letter, what is written, and the spirit. The spirit is the aspirational part of the agreement, which is even the things that we have not written, we will go above and beyond those things. So the text will say we want to achieve peace in South Sudan. The text itself doesn't achieve peace. There are certain things that we must do to achieve peace, and those are the spirits of the agreement. So the text and the spirit of the current agreement are both dead. And so we are trying to give life to a political situation in South Sudan that is completely paralyzed. It's not moving anywhere. I don't think there is a sane person in South Sudan who can tell me now that there is a political program in South Sudan that is progressing. The country is basically stuck, and the country is dying, both in terms of persons dying, but also even the spirit of people is dying. We don't feel happy about the state of affairs in our country right now. We are at our very lowest point. And so those who may think that the roundtable is not any different from the previous agreements would agree with us that the current agreement, the current status, which is the agreement that we have now, is not sustainable, is not tenable. It is difficult to cling to it. Even those who are implementing the peace agreement themselves know clearly in their minds that this thing is not working. The roadmap which they issued as a justification for the extension, they have missed critical deadlines already. A lot of critical deadlines have already been missed, which suggests that they will even do worse in implementing that roadmap than they did with the real peace agreement. And so why belabor? Why really work hard on something that you know has no fruits? So it is better we move out of that, and instead of creating a whole new peace agreement which will not be implemented, the objective of all the political reforms must be enshrined in the constitution. Let's go for a constitutional agreement in a peaceful and cordial environment, rather than allowing the frustrations to boil to the point of violence. And then later on, you come back to the same table, which we are calling for right now, to negotiate, but negotiate now with a lot of blood in people's hands. So we are appealing to members of the opposition and members of the public of South Sudan to support the roundtable, because the roundtable initiative is the cheapest, the more benign and peaceful way to end the political stalemate in South Sudan. The alternative to the roundtable is a looming violence. And I can tell you with high confidence that if South Sudan does not embrace the Roundtable Conference as a peaceful way of ending all this political violence, the country is ripe for a much more I don't know how to say it, but a large scale form of violence that will not fit the normal characteristics of the political violence in South Sudan. It will not be a confrontation between President Salva Kiir and Riek Machar, or it will not be a violent ethnic violence between the Nuer and the Dinkas and the Equatorians. It will be a very confusing sort of violence or frustration with the status quo. So you will not know who is on which side. It will be a very hysterical form of violence because our assessment of the fundamentals of the society now are frustrated.
It will be, sorry, it will be
Go ahead.
between those who have and those who don't have, between the poor and the rich.
I think so. So that is what we want to avoid, and the way to avoid it is to go now to the roundtable quickly, and to ask the government to stop this extension. The extension itself is going to be the trigger of violence, because people really don't want this situation to be extended beyond this year. They don't want to go next year with the same status. People are really frustrated, and a voice of reason in Juba must really listen and carefully and rescue the country by allowing this process to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Abraham. Well, to our viewers, this discussion is getting serious little bit, and I request you once more to share it. At least we get to know the interest of roundtable conference. You have mentioned numerous things, Abraham, in regard to roundtable conference. And to be honest, citizens now, most of them, especially those who are in Juba and in South Sudan in particular, they are not even aware that there are a certain group of opposition for roundtable. The only thing they are focusing now is the roadmap and how the government of South Sudan will take them throughout these additional periods of time until the votes actually successfully in the year 2024, and then the end agreement or roadmap in 2025, the month of February. At first, when you were talking about the national dialogue, Lagos State Media is aware that you were part of the secretariat during national dialogue. You know in and out of what those documents contain. You mentioned how citizens of South Sudan spoke and gave their proposals to the national government on how to handle their affairs. But you mentioned one thing that triggered everything and made the document to be dumped in the dustbin. And that was a request of the citizen that President Salva Kiir and his Vice President Dr. Riek should evacuate the offices or even leave powers and give them to other people to take them through the remaining period until they will vote successfully. That did not went well with the leaders. And I think that could be the main reason to why national dialogue is the way it is now. The same syndromes are now trying to appear on roundtable conference. You said your interest as a group is to converge inclusively, including church leaders use representatives and women to discuss the fate of South Sudan after the agreement, revitalized peace agreement. And you said you don't propose President Kir and Yang Machar to continue leading whatever outcomes will be of roundtable conference. Don't you think this thing will not go well with them?
Right.
Like the national dialogue proposal? Thank you.
Well, I think that is a fundamental question. Definitely, President Kiir and Dr. Riek Machar, if their wishes were to be given, they would rather want to die in power, isn't it? So that is basically their position. That is their position, and they have a power to back it up, the power of money and the power of the army. Now the problem is that the national consensus, the national roundtable that we are talking about, the dynamics are going to be different. The national dialogue, of course, was a program initiated by the president himself. And so when it was all said and done, it was given back to him. That was the natural sequence of events. Nobody else had more power than him. He was the head of state and government, and he was the initiator of the program. So at the end of it all, it was given back to him. Now, with the roundtable conference, there will be different stakeholders that will include President Kiir himself and the other parties who are members of the RRCs. So the good news is that the equation, the balance of power is going to be different. Some of the members of the RT-GONU who are now in Juba, they support the national dialogue, the roundtable conference, because they are convinced that the peace agreement has not been implemented in both its letter and its spirit. And therefore, the aspiration of the people of South Sudan that were enshrined in the preamble of that agreement have been failed. They have failed. And so while it may appear that President Kiir and Dr. Riek Machar have power right now, you never know whether that power will continue to be the same. We have eaten too much into that power, and we are gaining a lot of power on our side. And so it is not going to be a question of us begging President Kiir and Dr. Riek Machar to go home, as the national dialogue did. They will be demanded to step aside, and there will be consequences if they refuse. So that is basically what we are saying, and some of the consequences they already know. I'm not going to tell you, but they already know, and they already felt that there are consequences for intransigence or lack of willingness to move the country forward. No country should be led and be controlled and be held hostage by a few individuals. Countries govern on the basis of consensus. And so if a large number of people are no longer in agreement with you, you are basically a dictator. And therefore you are staying in power by brute force. And really that is basically what we are saying, that is not the nature of the country that we want to have. And so if President Kiir and Dr. Riek Machar frustrate the roundtable conference and it doesn't move forward, there are other options that will be explored that will end up the opportunities that they have right now to voluntarily participate in a roundtable conference and to engage in dialogue with the opposition groups may not be there. as time progresses and as more people get frustrated, the environment will be so different that they will not even have that opportunity. So even when they call, and there was an incident that happened in Uganda with former president of Uganda. The rebels were calling for some sort of a talk, and he said no, he doesn't talk with the rebels, and there is no such. And now a week later, the rebels the rebels took over, and he was calling for a he was calling for a talk, and people say, listen, didn't you say you don't talk? I mean, where is this calling for talk coming from? So the opportunity is there right now for President Kiir and Dr. Riek Machar and others to listen to the voice of reason and to talk. But if they allow the country to boil in frustration, then the time will come when they will have no opportunity to talk. But the matters will be imposed on them. And so this is not an empty talk. So they really need to pay attention and to accept the alternative, which is a nonviolent, peaceful approach, and to accept it while they still have power to negotiate the terms of peaceful exit, because those opportunities may not be there down the road. And the history is very clear on this type of things. You cannot frustrate the whole country, choke the economy of the country, hold the citizens hostage, provide no vision, and make life gloomy for everyone, and you expect that you are going to have a holiday. That is not going to happen. And so for citizens who are thinking that this issue of the roundtable is an empty talk, it may end up like a South Sudan national dialogue, I can assure you that that will not be the case. The temperature and the pulse of our citizens is something that we are monitoring very closely. And we are seeing that more and more people are in support of the call of what we are talking about. And when you see citizens going quiet, that's it. They have reached that point. They have reached that point where they can no longer talk because they have tried to make their voices heard. Their voices are suppressed. And when the voices are suppressed and people are quiet, it means that the options that they are contemplating are not necessarily good options. And so we want to avoid that. We want to avoid that. And it is important for the president and for the people who are in government to understand that the country is frustrated. The country is extremely frustrated. And the alternatives are bad. The alternatives that we are offering now is far better than the other alternatives that they are not contemplating. And so that is the message that I would like to pass, that the roundtable conference is not an initiative of President Kiir. It is an initiative of opposition groups in an attempt to tell the government that, okay, instead of seeking violence as a way of addressing matters, why don't we talk as citizens of South Sudan who assume to have some powers? You have power, you are the government, we are the opposition. Let us talk, let us chart a map toward reaching a peaceful resolution of the political crisis in the country. I think that is a proposition of patriotic people who love their country and who would like to see a democratic transition rather than a violent transition. But if the president and the government doesn't take that, then they are actually choosing the violent option. And there are people who are prepared to take on the government violently, whether on the streets or whether in the battlefields. And that is the option that the PCCA doesn't want. We want a peaceful resolution of the crisis in the country. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Abraham, for that. But the next question, Abraham, is roundtables looks like to bring everyone on board, including Juba regime. But the question is, how will you convince these people, especially the government, to join a roundtable conference? And remember two things. Once you want to test the ability, character of human being, as many philosophers said earlier, give them power and money. But that is what is happening now in our country. How are you going to convince Kir government or revitalized government to join roundtable conference? And remember, they already revitalized again to have roadmap, and they are now moving on, graduating unified forces, of which many citizens still live in fear in regard to these unified forces. People are not even seeing the ingredients which were supposed to be conducted in the field, how they were supposed to be trained, and at least to believe as nationalists or national army. They were
Well,
just few to 3 weeks and then graduated without those proper training. So even now, citizens still fear that there possibly could be another crisis at the end of roadmap agreement between President Kiir and Dr. Yak. How
well,
will you convince them? Secondly,
well,
also, you will look at, as you will answer that question, you will look at your position as opposition group. There are other oppositions who are not even buying the idea of roundtable. And remember, if 2 to 3 people don't join hand together, it's very hard to convince one person that has power and money. Thank you, Abraham.
well, first of all, how do we convince President Kiir and Dr. Riek Machar and others to join, and the government as a whole to join the roundtable conference? Well, we are using different approaches. So one is diplomacy. We are engaging the international community and the region to prove to them that the agreement that they have invested so much on is not working. And the extension itself is going to trigger a crisis in the country, a violent crisis. And so it is better that the region looks at the position that we are putting forward. So those efforts are ongoing already. Number two, the government was already involved in the negotiation with the opposition group through the Rome Initiative. And so the non-signatories and the whole-out groups that were negotiating with the government are now part of the National Consensus Forum, to which we are members. And the National Consensus Forum is much wider than the previous forum in which they were engaging with the non-signatories. And so the Rome Initiative is now going to be transformed into what we call the Roundtable Conference, because the objective of the Rome Initiative was to try to persuade the non-signatories and the whole-out groups, as the name suggests, to join the peace agreement. Now, the peace agreement is coming to an end, and they don't support the extension. And so there is no logic in trying to persuade people to join an agreement that has come to an end and has not been implemented in letter and spirit. So they have gone to Rome recently, and that is also an indirect answer to your question earlier, whether I was part of that. I was not. It was strictly the group that was negotiating with the government in Rome that went to Rome to formally inform the mediator that they are no longer interested in continuing that negotiation with the government, because the agreement that they have tried to join is coming to an end on the 22nd of December, and that it has not been implemented in letter and spirit, and therefore its extension is not justifiable. And to put in a request that now, if you want to continue engaging with us, as a government and as a mediators, we are now in the National Consensus Forum. And the National Consensus Forum proposes the National Roundtable Conference as the place where we will meet to talk with the government. So that is another approach. The third approach, of course, would be to continue to agitate for internal accountability. So people of South Sudan will become more and more and increasingly opposed to the failed leadership and also the failed implementation of the peace agreement, and that they will demand a new alternative. And so if this if the region and the international community agree with us, then they will persuade the government to participate. And the reason they will persuade the government to participate is because they don't want to deal with another crisis in South Sudan. They want the crisis in South Sudan to end once and for all, as it was intended by the agreement. And the fact that it has not been ended by the agreement is a result of lack of leadership and lack of political will on the side of those who are in power right now. And so others like us are justified to be unhappy and to be opposed to them. And so those are the reasons, those are the methods that we are using to persuade the government to participate. The next step, of course, would be using diplomacy also to deny government money. So the government will have no money. And to a larger degree, we have achieved that already. We will make sure that the government is frustrated, will not be able to take loans anywhere and be able to have an easy money, access to money, because they are not implementing public interests. And so that is also part of our diplomatic engagement. And there will be others. There will be other things that will make it difficult for the government to function in Juba. And if they are unable to function, the citizens will be very unhappy about that. And that will send them a message that, okay, maybe it is time to talk.
Thank you, Abraham, for giving those 4 points on how to convince the government of South Sudan to accept and join a roundtable conference. But you mentioned the Rome initiative, and that brings us to the fourth question. What is the difference between Rome initiative, roundtable conference, and national consensus forums? Which one is more powerful than the other one between the three? On that question, you will also tell us, recently you have seen the government sending a representative to Rome. They want to resume Rome initiative or discussions with the all-out groups. Could that be could that be another way of killing or sidelining a roundtable conference and bring forward the Rome initiative, which was actually seemed to be dead by the citizen? Because the Rome initiative has been there now for almost 3 years or 2 years. And if government was willing to talk with this all-out group, I think this all-out group would have been in Juba for the last 2 years. Is this another strategy of sidelining roundtable and national consensus forum by the government? Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. The short answer to your question is that the Rome Initiative, the National Consensus Forum, and the Roundtable Conference are one and the same. They are not different. So the groups that were part of the Rome Initiative, the PCCA and others, have created what we call the National Consensus Forum. This is a platform where the opposition groups will be creating consensus among themselves about what the problem is in South Sudan and how to resolve that problem. And now that position is what we will use in the roundtable conference to negotiate with the government. And so there is no difference between the group that were part of the Rome Initiative, the PCCA, and the National Consensus Forum. They have become one and the same. So now the question you are asking is whether the government is going to continue negotiating with the group of non-signatories and the whole-out groups who are members of the National Consensus Forum. And my answer to you is that no, that is not going to be the case. If the government wants to continue to negotiate with this group, they will do so through the roundtable conference in which the PCCA and other members who are not considered to be part of the Rome will be present, and they will be part of the negotiation. So, so the group that is called the non-signatories and the whole-out groups have ended that process in Rome, and that process is now being transformed into the roundtable conference. And the group that is going to be negotiating with the government is the group that is now composed of the membership of the National Consensus Forum. So that is why I said before, this group is one and the same. Now, if there are some opposition groups who are not members of the National Consensus Forum and they are opposed to the roundtable conference, on this particular question of the extension of the transitional period, and on the one second, and on the extension of the peace agreement, what do they suggest is the way forward in South Sudan? We are willing to listen to that. And mind you, our approach at the PCCA is to pursue nonviolent action. And so it is either we mobilize people to protest or we dialogue with the government to achieve the same objectives. So you pursue things that you believe in. So we believe in nonviolent action, and we believe in creating significant, sufficient internal pressure on the government and on President Kiir and Dr. Riek Machar to realize that their continuing to hold on to power without the consent of the people of South Sudan is becoming untenable. And therefore, they have to listen to the voice of reason and enter dialogue with people who are calling for them to step aside. And so the groups that are members of the National Consensus Forum are many and significant that they cannot be dismissed. They cannot be easily dismissed. And mind you, some members of the Revitalized Agreement are part of the National Consensus Forum. Some of them are still in Juba, some of them are outside. And so it is not a small entity. So if there are people who are non-members, it's a very small group, who may be able to come on board, and we are willing to take on their views. If they don't want the roundtable, what else do they want? We are willing to listen to that.
Thank you, Abraham, for that. But the last questions before we close the topic of roundtable, and then we move to the fate of our country now. Is where will you get funding from? I remember for roundtable to be effective, it needs money. They need money to facilitate your movement as the members, because I remember you are in different part of the world. They also need money to facilitate Juba delegation and even the regions, the regional bodies. Thank you.
Well, money for the roundtable is not a concern at all at the moment. There are ways and means in which such non-violent and benevolent activities are resourced. And so what is important now is to engage with the region, get the region to understand and to engage with the African Union, get the African Union to understand. And the reason we are doing this is because peace in South Sudan has impact on the IGAD and East African region. And so you cannot have a political initiative that is not supported by the region and that the region does not understand. We want to have a political process uh, with the support of the region and with the support of the African Union and the UN system and the rest of the international community. And if we are able to go through that route, that comes with also financial resources. And so we are not concerned about that at all. We have been given promises and assurances that if provided that it is a non-violent action and it is an action that is aimed at providing stability and achieving peace and democracy in South Sudan, it can be facilitated. And so we are not worried about that part. And so that is the least of our concern right now. The concern we have is the unity of our people, getting our people to unite around the vision and to pursue a nonviolent action that is rooted in political dialogue with the aim to end uh, uh, this politically motivated violence that has spread across the country, that has divided our people, that has choked our economy, and has humiliated basically the dignity of the people of South Sudan. We want that to be ended, and we want to develop a shared vision moving forward as a country, and do that in a collegial environment. We don't even have to fight or to argue. We really have to reason out that we have not lived up to the expectation of our people. We have not lived up to the aspirations that we have expressed during our liberation struggle, and we have not lived up to our commitment to the region to ensure that South Sudan is not a menace on the regional economies and not a burden in terms of sending refugees and displaced persons across the border. We have not lived up to those values, and that is basically what we are telling the region, that South Sudan can no longer serve as a burden to the region. We want to lift that burden by bringing a peaceful resolution to the conflict, send our people back home, regrow our economy, generate a lot of revenue through oil and other resources so that South Sudan economy can grow and therefore the regional economy can grow. That is basically our pitch to the region. And there is a lot of support to that kind of talk. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Abraham, for that answer that you gave in regard to the questions of where will you get finance from. Now we move to the affairs or the state of affairs of South Sudan, and especially the economic aspect. Citizens are asking themselves, Abraham, what is the fate of our country as we are approaching toward 2023? The economy is not what makes people happy. Citizens are sad, and prices of goods in the market is going up day by day, since we are a free economy country. And the dollar rate, because our economy now depend on only two things. It depends on oil, the price of oil, and the dollar rate. And when you look at the two, the prices is high. And citizens are asking, will there be change at the beginning of new year? Or will the situation be worse at the beginning of 2023? And remember, we have only 4 points where our government always gets some coin of money. And that is Minister of Finance, Central Bank, Nile Pad, and National Revenue Authority. Yet the citizens are not even feeling the effect of those money that being milking from those 4 points. What can you say about that, about the status of our economy now as the country?
Right. Well,
thank you.
Thank you very much, Brother Majuk, for that important question. South Sudan economy is the lifeline of many people in the country. So when the economy is alive, people are alive. As I talk to you right now, the economic situation in South Sudan is terrible. People are not able to afford basic food commodities. Basic food commodities cannot even go to other locations. For example, the Bararoza Road is now cut off. People are no longer using that road. So that means if there are goods, they are airlifted. And when goods are airlifted, that is an additional cost. Maybe 20%, 50% additional cost on top of an extremely expensive food items already. And so so the economy is not growing this year. The economy will not grow at all. It will shrink. And the projections also in next year is that the economy will also shrink. And I can tell you that the economy is very nervous. Economy behaves like human being. When you have when there is a threat of fear in the air, you stop doing anything. You cannot work. You cannot even go hunt. You cannot farm because you feel insecure. You need security. So that is the same thing with the economy. The peace agreement is not going well. The political climate in the country is uncertain. There are incidents of violence everywhere in the country, especially in Upper Nile region, and there is uncertainty of peace. Nobody is so sure whether we really have peace in South Sudan. That is actually the largest and the biggest failure of the current agreement. It has not given people assurance of peace since it was signed in 2018 up to now. 4 years since it was signed, 4 years and 2 months to yesterday. It was 4 months, 4 years and 2 months yesterday since the agreement was signed, and it has not given any assurance of peace. The dividends that were expected out of it have not been seen. And so the crisis will continue to grow. Now, the oil is not, we are not getting enough oil into the market because the oil fields, some oil fields, some wells have run out, and we don't have, because of sanctions, South Sudan cannot get new equipment to explore, to dig new wells. As well, the infrastructure that we have is outdated. There's certain things are broken, so we are not able to pump enough oil, and there is insecurity in some places, so some wells cannot be operated, and so we are not getting enough oil into the market. And because of the recent decision by OPEC to increase production, to decrease production, oil prices can go up a little bit, which means more money could come into the country. But then you have a lack of transparent management of public financial resources. So that money, even when it comes, it doesn't get injected into the economy. So the money get wasted, get banked by few individuals, and there is nothing that goes into the economy. How do you expect things to go to the economy, money to go to the economy? You pay government employees. The moment you pay government employees, that money goes into the economy. You pay government contractors. The moment you pay government contractors, that money goes into the economy. You transfer money to the states and to the payams and bomas and to the counties. That money will find itself into the economy. And once the money is in the economy, the production will go up. People will begin to produce. And when people produce, that means more income is coming, and government can tax it and generate more income, which will be used to pay people. It is a cycle. But now, when you don't pay people for 6 months, the economy doesn't eat for 6 months. And therefore, it cannot grow fat. It will shrink. This is how shrinking happens. And when you have uncertainty in the political environment, there is no investment. So there is zero investment. There is zero foreign investment. And when there is zero foreign investment, there is no growth. And so really, we anticipate that the donors will continue to cut their program. How do they cut their programs? Now, the people of South Sudan need to know that the government has closed the civic space. When civic space is closed, then the money that was used to finance NGOs that were promoting democracy and promoting human rights and promoting public participation, that money is cut. Because if you give money to those type of organizations, there is no space for them to operate. They can, so there is no money that will come, and therefore that means there is not some less money will come into the country as a result of that. Furthermore, the internally displaced persons, the NGOs and the international community is beginning to question why should they continue to invest in people who are displaced by their own government and the government is not caring for them. So the food going toward those people will be cut, and the support to political development in the country, promotion of democracy and all of that, there was resources coming for that. That money will not come anymore because there is no political program. There is no democracy being promoted. And so there are so many ways South Sudan is losing money. And when you lose money, you lose the economy and more people become unemployed, and then more people become frustrated, and therefore the country become unstable more and more. So we anticipate that in 2023, the economy will do worse than now. On the exchange rate basically is a commodity. Dollar is a commodity. It is sold and bought in the market. And so when there is more supply for it, then the value of dollar goes down. When there is less supply for it, the value of dollar goes up. So why is there a huge demand for dollars in South Sudan? Because the whole country lives outside South Sudan. We have to feed our families in Nairobi. We have to pay their rents. We have to pay school fees for our children in Khartoum and in Cairo and in Kampala and Nairobi and in Kigali. We have to pay our children's medical services. We have to pay for their food. And so the country is losing money because their hard currency is needed for us to transfer it to our families in East Africa and in North Africa. Because really they don't live in South Sudan. So the working class, what the small middle class that we have, all their money is earned in Juba, but then it transferred to East Africa and to North Africa to sustain families there. That is what keeps the demand for dollars so high. The second aspect of it, of course, is that we are running a demand side of the economy. We are not supplying anything. We are demanding, and so we are importing a lot of food items and drugs and other things. And so our business people need hard currency to go and to buy things in Dubai, to buy things in Nairobi and Kampala, and bring them back to the market. So that is where the demand for the dollar is always high. And of course, the value of South Sudanese pounds keep going down because the government keep printing more money because they don't have money to finance its activities. They continue to do deficit financing. And when you do deficit financing, you are basically injecting too much money into the economy, and there are few goods that they are going to buy. And so the more pounds you have in the market, and the more the more of it you will use to buy very few items. So that is how the dollar and the exchange rate is affected. So it is not a normal exchange rate regime. It is an exchange rate that is drunk because of so much demand for hard currency in those two areas that I have mentioned.
Yeah, thank you so much, Abram. You have mentioned critical points in regard to the economy of our country, the issue of hard currency, and that is dollar. You mentioned it very correctly. It's because almost half of our population in the country live outside South Sudan, and all these people demand their people to support them, their fathers, husbands, and brothers, sisters. And to support them, you need hard currency to support them in whatever countries that they resided in. And the issue of our oil, actually, you mentioned there is flood issue on the other side of oil field, and even the machines which our oil sector has been using for the last almost 11 years, some of them actually are no longer in a good shape, and it's hard for them to purchase new one in order to boost the production. And also the issue of pre-sold oil up to 2027, and now the oil price is already high in the world oil market due to the Russian-Ukraine issue. But we have no that advantage completely because we have already sold our oil until 2027. And if we were to have that chance, I think our government would be in the right position now to make good amount of money out of oil. Thank you for that. Before we move to your last remark, uh, I'm rightly informed that there are two questions at the comment section. One of them has already been displayed here by Jamal. Can you ask him what is he doing with this he left behind? With those he left behind in prison. Basically, he's talking about your member as PCCA, that is Kwela Gwerkwel. And then the next question from Alew Wall is, Abraham, my question is, what about those all arms? Do they are going to part of a round table or be left out? Basically, he's asking about the arms group, especially the rebels, the like of Thomas Cirillo, the like of Simon Gadwich, the like of Stephen Boy. Will they be part of round table, or they are considered as the violent group and you are non-violence group? Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. On the issue of the people who are detained, Kwela Agwero, we are working really hard, and we have secured significant support for Kwel to be released, and now he's going through the court, and we don't want to commit contempt of the court to make comments on the procedure, so let the process go. And we have given sufficient support to ensure that this process takes place. It is a result of our action that these hearings that are ongoing are being held now with the objective of having Kwel release. Kwel is our leader, is a key member of the PCCA. He signed the PCCA document, but he was arrested on the 2nd of August, just 2 days after we have issued the conference, the declaration. And so much of what we have been doing at PCCA, he has not been part of it. But we have never forgotten his situation. We have advocated for his release. We have actually been having under the table communication with the government and negotiating with the government to make sure that Kwel is released. And we have also secured international support to push for his release. And so is that of Abraham Chol. And you have seen 2 of them have now been taken to court. There are certain things that you don't talk about in the public. These are some of the efforts that we take. And so that is very much what I can say. We fully support the release of Kwel and Abraham Chol, and we support the court process that is ongoing, and we hope that justice will be done. With regards to the participation of the armed groups, the Roundtable Conference will be inclusive of everybody. Everybody who is a stakeholder in the South Sudan political climate will be considered. The National Consensus Forum, as I have already mentioned, has membership of all these organizations, including Stephen Boy, Paul Malone, um, Thomas Cirillo, and others who are armed. They are part of the National Consensus Forum, and now we are in talks with the Kitgwang under Simon Gadwich to join the National Consensus Forum. And so they will be part of the negotiation. Nobody will be left out, because we really don't want to have some agreement in the constitutional agreement in the roundtable conference. Then we go home only to realize that there are some people who are still struggling. We don't want to do that. We want to end the crisis in South Sudan once and for all, and therefore all that count. And those who have made claim that they are opposition and that they are armed, we will look for them, bring them under one table, and persuade them that let us pursue nonviolent action for now. And of course, with their option of violence being the last resort should the government refuse to negotiate. So that is what I can say about the participation of all armed groups. They will be there. They will be part of the solution. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Abraham. We have come to the end of our show, and before we close our show, we will give you time to give your last remark. Also, there is another question here. What can you say about intimidation that's being done to people in the country, especially young who write on social media regarding bad deeds in South Sudan? From Robert Majang. Another question from Aken. Mr. Abraham, do you think that this roundtable conference you talk about should be the solutions to the problems we have in South Sudan? Yeah, you will answer those two questions, and then we will give you a chance to give us your last remark and your appeal to other people that are opposing the group or roundtables and also the citizens of our country. Thank you, Abraham.
Right. Well, thank you very much. On the question of the intimidation, it is a real concern for us, especially the PCCA, because we have a wide membership of people in South Sudan who support us, who are intimidated. Even in the villages, people are intimidated, and because they are suspected to be supportive of the PCCA. We condemn that, and we ask that the country that we fought for, a country that does not intimidate people, but reason with people. And so that is part of what we are trying to resolve by having this dialogue. And the roundtable conference dialogue will definitely open up both civic and political spaces to allow people to speak freely. They can even speak freely in criticism of us, and that is good. We have no problem with that, as long as we can reason with them. This is the country that we are advocating for, a country in which people are allowed to speak their minds and to express their displeasure and disappointments with the performance of political leadership. And the political leadership would be willing to come to them and reason with them and say, the reason we are taking this decision is because of A, B, C, D. What do you want us to do in light of that? That is the type of country that we are advocating for. And for citizens that who feel intimidated, if they are threatened because of what they say, the only power you have is to mobilize. The more people you have speaking, the more difficult it is for the government to oppress you. So that is the whole idea. That's why we call for popular uprising, because we are saying if we speak with one voice, many of us, the government will have no choice but to listen to us. So let us keep mobilizing, let us keep speaking, and we will, in the end, we will overcome. Even the soldiers and the policemen that are used to suppress us, they are also getting frustrated. They are not happy. They are citizens of South Sudan, of course. They must eat, they must sleep, and they need medical attention. And if they are not able to get that, they can also complain like the rest of us. And so over time, the number of people who would want to speak out will outgrow the number of people who would want to suppress them. And that is how we will win. That is how we will reestablish our country. On the question of whether the roundtable conference will be the solution to all our problems, I would be, it would be unrealistic for me to think so. What we are trying to do with the roundtable is to get the country back on the right path and have a new political dispensation that we hope in the long run will be the solution to the problems of South Sudan. No country would ever run out of problems. But when you have the right leadership and you have a right political system, you will always respond accordingly to meet those challenges. The problem we are facing right now is because we have a leadership that has failed to meet the challenges of the current situation in South Sudan, and they are unwilling or incapable of responding to evolving political crisis. That is the reason people are asking for them to step aside. Now, if you have a capable leadership, you would have to anticipate that in every country, crisis will come, but then leaders will step up to that crisis at that moment and address them, and citizens will be happy. And then people move on, new crises will come, a leadership will rise above and beyond those crises, address them, citizens will be happy, and we keep moving. That's how countries move forward, even individuals. There are times when you have your own personal crisis, but you have to rise above those crises and move forward. If you fail to rise above those crises, then you are gone, you are done. You take a different turn in your life, and you become irrelevant to yourself, to your family, to your communities. And people will begin to say that so and so has failed, so and so is not capable, is not a man, is not a man enough, or he has lost his mind. It is because you have failed to meet the challenges that you are facing at a certain point and you lose track. This is precisely the situation we are facing in South Sudan. We are simply saying our current leadership is not able to rise to the occasion to address the crises that have come in South Sudan. They have gotten out of their hands. They cannot manage them. And if they are not able to respond and manage this crisis, their stay in power is unjustifiable. They must go, and new leaders must come. And they have been given opportunities time and again. For example, in 2013, in December 2013, on that day when they had the National Liberation Council, if they rose to the occasion and addressed their internal matters, the trajectory of South Sudan would be a different story today. There would not have been any crisis. Number two, if they had risen to above to their crisis when they had the opportunity of that agreement in 2015, the events of July 2016 would not have occurred, and the trajectory of South Sudan right now would have been different. There would not have been PCCA or anything else, or the Roundtable Conference. Furthermore, they were given another opportunity in December 2018. In September 2018 with this current agreement. If they had implemented the peace agreement, and if they had done and rose above the challenge that we are facing as a country now, there would not be any discussion right now about the Roundtable Conference. Or even better, if they were to implement the resolutions of the South Sudan National Dialogue, these discussions that we are having now would be different things. We would be talking about the highways that we need to build, the dams that we need to build. We would not be talking about ending a crisis. And so we are not saying the Roundtable Conference would be the solution to all the problems in South Sudan, but we hope that they will be the end of the problem of failure of leadership in South Sudan, and that we will have leaders that will continue to rise above crisis should the crisis come. And that means that the country will be progressing in different direction, and the political system will be set up in such a way that should Abraham Awuolich get to power by mistake, and he goes and fail the people of South Sudan and do not deliver, the political system should be able to respond within a timely fashion to say, Abraham Awuolich, this is not what we had expected. Thank you very much for your service. Have a good day and go home. And a new leader comes. This is the essence of state and nation development. But if you have a situation where leaders are stagnated, the country is stagnated, the political system is paralyzed, and the economy is choking, is not able to breathe, and you want to stay like that forever, then you are basically setting yourself up for a dramatic failure. And that is basically what we have become. We have failed, and we need to get out of this crisis right now. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Abraham Awuolich. To our viewers, we really appreciate your comments and your question and your time too to come and listen to our guest, Abraham Awuolich. Before we close the show, Abraham, what is your last message that you need to send to the citizen of South Sudan and the leadership at large? Thank you.
Thank you very much. My message to the people of South Sudan is simple. I'm a mid-age young person. You know, I'm in my 40s now. I'm 42, 43 right now. That is my age. And what I would have preferred to do, if I had the choice in South Sudan, is to continue to develop my career, both in research and in management. That's what I'm interested in. I really had no intention to get into politics in any shape or form. I wanted to be a technical person, just work behind the scene, get things moving. The type of work that I did in the national dialogue to support the political leaders to do their best job. The type of work that I did in the office of president to support the minister to be a good public servant and to serve the people of South Sudan well. That's what I wanted to do. But then I realized that these political leaders that I want to support were not set up to run the country. They have no will or the capacity to actually get things done. And they decided that instead of developing ideological differentiation to claim power, that they resort to dividing the people of South Sudan along tribes and ethnicity to maintain power. And if you dispute this, let me give you one evidence. In July 2016, on that 8th of July day, that fateful day, when our young men supporting President Kiir and Dr. Riek Machar fought in a close range, and nearly 300 and over 300 people were killed right there around J1, and blood was flowing on the streets of Juba. And after they killed each other and no one else was there, a report came into the building where President Kiir and James Waniga and Dr. Riek Machar were seated. And the report was that there is no more fighting, the soldiers are finished. And now the crisis is over. If you take time to think about that moment, what were they fighting about? Who told them to fight? And the question that is still unanswered, and we must demand an answer, is if the story is true that Riek Machar wanted to take power at that time, there were two possible outcomes. If a coup leader is caught, he is either shot or taken to jail. That day, President Kiir, the government story, the version of the government story is that It was Dr. Riek Machar who wanted to take power in J1. Now his soldiers were finished. He was there. He should have. There are two possible scenarios. He should have either been taken to jail, or he should have been shot. Neither of those things happened. What ended up happening was President Kiir protected Dr. Riek Machar when he took him to his bulletproof vehicle, put him there, and took him to his house. And the next day, President Kiir ordered an attack on Riek Machar now in his residence so that he can be fought. And then a war broke out, and Dr. Riek Machar ended up going to Congo. Now, if you have any sense of logic, why do you protect somebody, put him in his car, take him home, only to come later to attack him when you had the opportunity either to kill him there or to take him to jail? My analysis is that this is a political game. This is a political game. You people of South Sudan, you need to pay attention very carefully. President Kiir has not given you an answer why he didn't put Dr. Riek Machar to jail, or why he didn't kill him. Why did he put him in his car, protected him, but only ended up attacking him and his forces later, another day, and a war broke out? Why did that happen? This is a game of a strategy for President Kiir to stay in power using violence. This is the only explanation. They claim that, oh, he doesn't want to have blood in his hand. It's bogus. You don't have to kill him. Take him to jail and question him why he wants to overthrow the government, and let us hear the court. Why didn't they do that? And that question is fundamental to the future of South Sudan. And it is also fundamental to why I'm unhappy with the way things are in the country. It is a political game. These people want to stay in power, and they want to use violence that is ethnically based to keep power. And Dr. Riek Machar himself wants power, and he is playing in the same game. He's going along with the same game. And so, if that is how we plan to keep power in South Sudan, and we don't seek the consent of the people of South Sudan through election, that is the type of politics that I'm opposed to. And when the people of South Sudan sat and agreed through the national dialogue, I thought that we were saving the soul of our country. Because our people were scattered by the war of 2016, and there was fear of genocide in the country. So we felt genuinely that we want to pull our people together and to avert genocide. And we succeeded in doing that, only to have our leaders, the very leaders who created the situation that almost led to genocide, to turn down the voices of ordinary people. These are the things that justify our action. And so we are not just mad men seeking power. We are men who have observed how our country is being run, and we have reached conclusion that we are not going anywhere with this type of political game, that change must happen. If change doesn't come, this country is sure to die. And that is why I have joined the PCCA. That's why I signed the PCCA declaration. And that's why I keep talking here. I'm extremely convinced that President Kiir and Dr. Riek Machar have something to tell the people of South Sudan about that incident that happened in Juba. The thousands of men that were killed under Jebel Kujur, men of national security, men of the military intelligence, the Matianganyor boys, and the Nuer boys who were brought from, who were highly trained, and those who were killed in J1 somebody need to explain what killed those people. And we have not gotten an explanation for that. And we must ask questions about that. Whatever story that we have been told is a lie. It's not convincing. And the sequence of events that led to Riek Machar being taken out of J1, and then later on, the man left at night, and after they knew that he had left, then they attacked his compound and fought with the soldiers. And later on to come back and sign an agreement. Something has to be explained about that. I'm not satisfied with the explanation given, and I know it is a political game, and that is the type of political game that we must end. And so when we say we need a roundtable conference, we want a roundtable conference which we will talk about the spirit of this country. We have pulled our people apart. We have divided them for unjustifiable reasons, as I have just explained. And if we are to pull them together, you don't pull people together with a shady peace agreement negotiated by with the support of foreigners in foreign land. You really need to have a real talk, heart to heart, the type of which we have seen in the national dialogue. And that is why we prefer the National Roundtable Conference rather than a peace talk. Because a peace talk is technical. You come and say, I want this, I want that, I want ceasefire, I want this. That's not what we are interested in. We want to talk as a people of this country, heart to heart. How do we stop harming each other? How do we stop these political games? How do we stop frustrating our progress, our prosperity? We need to focus on how to promote our prosperity together as a people. This is what brought me into this political scene, as you have mentioned before, Brother Majuk. This is what got me into being a technical person, being a researcher, into a political space. Because I have seen that there are people in our country playing with the lives of our people. And I cannot sit on the sideline and watch them do that. And that is why I'm here, and I'm here to speak. And I want the people of South Sudan to begin to ask hard questions about the existence of this country. Because in the end, if we fail to ask these questions, the questions will impose themselves on us and will lead to the collapse of this nation. And so if we want to save our country, if we want to save the future of our children, we must invest in asking these hard questions now, address them now while we are still alive, so that we can chart a way for a free people, purely free people that will be born after we have all long died. Thank you very much.
Wow. Thank you, Abraham, for that touching take back. The incident of J1 has really changed my mood. That somebody coming to tell you that the fight is over. Then you ask what happened, who stopped the fighting? Then the answer is, we have cleared them. That statement is so painful. And those soldiers, they don't even know the reason why they died. Or they kill each other. If such soldiers, especially those who died in J1, have a chance to return out to life and see how the leaders whom they killed themselves on their behalf driving now in Juba, I think those soldiers can give South Sudanese a very powerful message. Indeed, it's so painful. People died for something which they don't even know. Even if God will ask them, why are you here and I did not even call you to come yet, they will have no answer to provide to God. Thank you so much for reminding us about such event and for also telling South Sudanese to rethink in regard to that J1 incident only, leave alone the issue of 2013. What brought J1 incident? is not clear completely. Thank you for that. And up to this juncture, we really appreciate you, Abraham, for always finding time to come and talk to citizens through Lagos State Media. On behalf of Lagos State Media, we appreciate you wholeheartedly, and we will always be there. It is our mandate as media platform to bring guests and speak to the citizen and share your opinions. And to our viewers, thank you so much for tuning in and listen always to our guests. That is the way to go. As people said several times, that information is power, and people perish if they don't have information. And that's what is happening in our country. Our citizens need to be equipped with full information and the right information, not political information. Thank you so much to our viewers, and thank you so much, Awuolich, for your time. We will keep talking as you are actually selling the idea of roundtables to many South Sudanese. And those who are outside there, if you have an opinions and you feel like you want to air out to the citizen, Lagos State Media is your platform, and you are entitled to come and give us your perspective. And whatever people said here may not be true 100%, but the choice is yours. Analyze them, correlate them with other information that you may get from other sources, and you may come out with your clear judgment on which route to take and which group to support. After this juncture, may God bless you, Abraham. May God bless our viewers.
Thank you very much.
May God bless South Sudan.
The Lagos State Media team.
It's your boy Young Love, I give him that thing. Pancho Lagos State, Panchi America, Panji Dwal, Pancho Lagos State, Panchi America, Panji Dwal, Ban walk on the lake, Kankara water no watching, Oga level leg, Gear Bow, Garay Lake, Panda with Yay, Panchi America, Panya Dwalabano, Chingatonga Pandon, could you ever buy a check? Papu Panda Jiro, what they be Dwalaventing. Panchi America, Panji Dwal, Pancha Lagos State, Panchi America, Panji Dwal, Ban walk on the lake, Kankara water no watching, Oga level leg, Gear Bow, Garay Lake, Panda with Yay, Panchi America, Panya Dwalabano, Chingatonga Pandon, could you ever buy a check out? Papu Panda Jiro, what they be Dwalaventing.